Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're literally popping the hood on a bank's business model to understand how it actually survives and thrives. We spend so much time looking at a bank's lending like it's this massive, powerful engine. But here's the thing, an engine is absolutely useless without the right fuel. So today, we're zooming in on step 2 of our analysis, examining the funding. We're going to put a magnifying glass directly on the true cost of a bank's funds. Let's kick things off with a core principle from our source material. It says a wide margin is only durable if it rests on cheap, stable funding. Think about that for a second. A bank can have the absolute best lending engine in the world, pumping out loans and flashing these massive, impressive headline profits. But if the fuel running that engine is too expensive, well, those profits are going to evaporate faster than you'd think. And that brings us right to step 2. Examine the funding. See, step 1 usually gets all the glory. That's where we look at the profits generated from lending. But step 2 asks the absolutely vital underlying question: is the bank funded cheaply and safely? Before we get fooled by a really flattering earnings headline, we have to anchor our focus on the actual cost of those funds. So what exactly is the ultimate premium fuel? It's CASA, current and savings accounts. In plain English, this is the share of deposits sitting in everyday checking and savings accounts. And honestly, it is the absolute cheapest money a bank can get its hands on. Rather than relying on really expensive wholesale borrowing, these everyday accounts act as the premium, low-cost fuel that keeps a bank's operations highly profitable and running smoothly. The cause and effect here is just incredibly direct. High and rising CASA equals a defensible margin. When your funding costs are practically zero, because let's face it, your checking account isn't paying you much interest, the bank gets a super durable profit spread. They aren't paying a fortune to depositors just to have the raw capital available to lend out. That creates a defensible moat that can actually withstand sudden market shocks. Which sets up a really vital comparison: cheap, stable funding versus expensive, fragile funding. Those everyday CASA accounts, they are incredibly sticky. People rarely go through the hassle of moving their everyday checking accounts, making them super reliable fuel. On the flip side, we have bulk deposits. Relying on bulk deposits is both expensive and, frankly, extremely fragile. These are massive sums of money demanding premium interest rates, and they will vanish the absolute second a competitor offers a slightly better yield. Now, here's where you need to start treating these metrics like a check engine light on your dashboard. An early warning sign is a falling CASA ratio. If you see that happening, you better pay attention. A dropping CASA ratio means the cheap fuel is actively draining from the tank. And you know what that means? The bank is inevitably going to have to pay more just to keep its lending engine running, meaning margins are about to come under serious pressure. Which brings us to a massive red flag: heavy reliance on bulk deposits. When a bank's cheap CASA funding falls, they still need money from somewhere to keep growing their loan book, right? Well, if they start leaning heavily on expensive bulk deposits just to fund themselves, our source explicitly warns that this is a glaring sign of funding stress. The bank is essentially borrowing expensive, flighty money just to keep up appearances and mask a degrading core deposit base. So how do professionals gauge exactly how stretched a bank is? They use the credit-deposit ratio. By definition, this metric shows how stretched the lending is against the available deposit base. Think of it as a measure of how far a bank is willing to stretch its limited fuel to keep growing that loan book. If a bank brings in $1 of deposits, exactly how much of that dollar is being immediately sent right back out the door as a loan? The danger zone, according to the source material, is the high 80s. If a credit-deposit ratio pushes into the high 80s, that is a massive red flag flashing right at you. It means the bank is lending out practically all of the deposits it brings in. They're operating with virtually zero slack, leaving absolutely no room for error if there's a sudden macroeconomic shift. Let's bring all these clues together, shall we? What does the ultimate red flag scenario look like? Well, it's the exact anatomy of a straining bank. First, you've got a falling CASA ratio. The cheap money is disappearing. Second, heavy reliance on bulk deposits. They're paying a premium for fragile money. And finally, a credit deposit ratio in the high 80s. They are stretched to the absolute limit. This specific combination means the bank is desperately straining just to fund its own growth. To prevent getting caught off guard, keep this analyst's checklist handy. I highly recommend taking a mental screenshot of this exact sequence of metrics. First, the CASA ratio and its trend. Is it going up or down? Second, the overall deposit growth year on year. Third, look closely at the cost of funds. And fourth, check that credit deposit ratio.
This is exactly how professionals determine if a bank's funding base is cheap and sticky or expensive and fragile.
Which brings us to our final thought for this explainer. Armed with this exact analytical framework, you have the tools to look past those flattering headline earnings. You've got to look at the underlying numbers and ask the tough question: is your bank actually funded cheaply and safely, or is it secretly straining to grow? I really challenge you to apply this sticky versus fragile lens to your own analysis. It completely changes the game. Thanks for joining me. Keep analyzing those numbers, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.